consider which of the faces is important to be pretty. If this face over here, the top face, if whatever this was, that had to have the best finish, you would have to play around with supports. But right now, let's say you didn't particularly care about that side, then the best orientation would be something more along like that. But again, you can't have it a parallel surface, so you'd want to rotate it a bit more so you do not have any parallel surfaces. So something maybe along the lines of that. That looks. I would choose that because that's going vertically, and we could support it from this side over here and this side over here, and they would have a torque and a counter torque. So that, like if I were to add supports, you can see that right there. I would also add additional supports. I would add something along the lines of like this to that, because at this point in time, it's not very well supported right here. At this point in time, before I added my supports, let me remove my supports just to show you what G2 Box automatically does supports. At this point in time, it's not supported at all with the default G2 Box supports over here. So this over here, that has no support. So that could be pulled off there. It only finally gets supports right at that point in time. So all of this, as it's building this huge section here, there could be a torque there. So I personally would add supports like this. And personally, I like adding the supports like this so they can kind of like hold each other up and to make sure they're nice and straight. If you just have like a free support like that, I have a tendency to think that they might shift a little bit over time as things are built up. So I always think it's nice to have a little adjacent support like that if possible. But anyway, the main idea I wanted to talk about here, removing all supports, is you have to really think about it as it is being built. So if I rotate it to show you something like just this, just to show you that as it's being built up, you don't need strong supports for it here. You don't need strong supports here. You don't need strong supports here. You only start needing strong supports when it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because at this point, there's starting to be a large force here compared to this smaller force that you would have down here. So you have to constantly think about, it's a tug of war. There's force from the build plate, which you want to win. There's the force from the FET plate. There's also torques caused by unbalanced supports. And there's also suction. You want to make sure that you add drainage when you have a hollowed out model. Speaking of which, I would be very hesitant in making a very big solid object. Not only because it would waste a ton of resin, but the weight of all of that resin is going to really pull on the supports. So if you really needed it to be solid, you would really heavily fortify all the supports. And I think it's a much better strategy in most cases just to make it hollow. So you hollow it maybe like 2 millimeters, something like that, depending on what you're doing. Oops. Okay, there we go. So you can see that is hollowed. Make sure you add drainage holes. You want to add a hole close to the base to relieve suction. So I could add like a hole close to the base. I don't know why I don't see the hole. There we go. There. My cursor's not giving me. It's weird. My cursor's not showing me the hole. Anyway, I would put a hole. My cursor's being a little bit weird here. Let me. That's weird. cursor's being weird. I wonder if that's an issue with Zoom. I'm recording this. But anyway, you want a hole close to where it first gets hollowed to avoid suction. You can see it from the top. Close to where it first is hollow, so you get suction. You also want a hole, if possible, close to the highest most point, so it can drain. And you always want at least 2 holes, otherwise you can get you don't have fluid flowing and pressure equalizing that way. So you want to make sure that you have at least 2 holes. And I don't know why my holes are not adding here. That's weird. Anyway, that's just a few things to consider when you're adding supports. This particular weird shape, if I didn't care about the orientation, or like if I didn't care about which face was pretty, I would do something like this. Seems like this is a bug there. I'm not sure what's going on with that, but I would do something like something rotate. Oops. Screen's being a little wonky. Rotate, maybe something like that. It's a weird shape I have. Oh, I'm not showing it. I would do something. I also am trying to minimize the amount of height so it doesn't take too long to build. Sometimes that is not a factor. Depends on what you're doing. This is being a little wonky. Something along those lines, I would say, something like that. Yeah, so, and then I would add supports like this. And I always like to add a few extra ones right when we start. So here and here, maybe even here and here, depending on how careful I'm being. And I also like to add this, I would say would be, I think that could be kind of like a torque there. So I would add, maybe if we're starting about here, I would add something like this. And that should be good. So as it's building up, like this, you can see that's supported. And just when it would start to be unsupported over here, as far as the forces are concerned, it's still supported as far as like islands, but as far as the forces are concerned, now it's being supported by the build plate. It's being anchored to the build plate by these, and those are holding it up. And by the time we get to here, I don't really need to do too much more, because at that point, it's well supported on this side. It's have like a counter force. And then it starts getting supported over there. So this is how I would support, or something like this. I'm just kind of eyeballing it here. I would support this sort of shape, kind of like that. And again, if I were doing this in reality, I would do it hollow, and I would add drainage holes. You always want to add the drainage holes before you do your supports. And as far as one of the options, as far as adding the holes, keep the hole, I never like that option, because with resin, in my experience, it's very difficult to get a very nice, perfect fit. So I always fix holes with a little drop of the uncured resin. I shine it with the little 405 nanometer light, the violet light. And you can, it's viscous enough for small holes to bridge, and just a couple of different passes of that will build up that hole and make it nice and solid, and you don't have to mess with these keep the hole things. So it's trying to keep the hole. Where'd it go? I would put it way over there. Yeah, so if you ever actually try to print one of these and use it to plug the hole, in my experience, it doesn't work very well, because I have, with the settings I've used, this hole and this never really seemed to fit very well. You can try to sand this a little bit, but in my experience, it's easier just to get a little drop here with a paintbrush, put it around quickly before it moves, shine it with a light, then do it another time and build it up so it's flat, and then you can sand it if you want it looking nicer. But try to find your drainage holes in a rather inconspicuous place. But anyway, that's a few tips.